So I'm going to ask each of you folks, starting from the right, to tell me your name, rank, and serial number.
I'm Kevin Campbell, and I'm the CEO at Tsunami. In case you didn't see from my shoes or my jacket. We're a data company, do the hardest data work for the world's largest companies.
I'm Riju, and I run the growth function for Genpact.
Krishna, Sudheendra, CEO of UST.
I'm Gajen Kandiah. I'm the President CEO at Hitachi Digital. I'll come back and explain Hitachi later.
Sunil Mittal, I'm the CEO at Movate.
And Jeff Augustin, I'm the Vice President of Global Business Services at Merck.
Thank you very much, folks. So we're going to have a little bit of a lively session to end the day. And I've invited someone called me the other day an elder statesman. Like, is that a compliment, or are they trying to paint me as some old curmudgeon? But
Means you're durable.
Durable, right. So yes, I decided to assemble some statesmen and stateswomen from the industry who've seen this change going on in the last couple of decades. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where we are, and we've had some good conversation today about this. We heard Ravi this morning talking quite candidly about how he's trying to steer a $20 billion juggernaut in a flatlining industry. But I think it'll be good to, really get down a little bit more into the weeds on, why has there been a big flatlining of growth in services, and is this a temporary blip? Or is there a fundamental change going on between enterprises and service partners? So maybe, Sunil, you wanted to answer this question, so I'm going to go straight to you.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So I think a lot of it has been covered. But see, first of all, we should not be complaining because the last 3 years have been really great for the industry. So it's like getting back to reverse to the mean to some extent. So that's one we should rationalize. We should also rationalize to ourselves that COVID did accelerate a lot of digital investments in multiple ways. The second is that there is the whole cloud and SaaS adoption is also reducing the need for technology people as well. Third is the need for people itself because of productivity improvement, whether it's CX, whether IT. We are clearly seeing that there is big productivity gains that can be had. And while there are investments going on into digital capabilities and all that stuff, but more importantly is the AI investment. Like everyone's talking about 10% of the investments are going to AI, but where is the money coming from? Because the budgets are flat. There is no clear business case to go and ask for more money to the CFO because there is no business case right now yet. So the money has to come from existing investments. And that means the discretionary projects are coming down, spend is coming down. So there are multiple reasons why, from our vantage point of view, we say that why the services industry is seeing flatline growth.
Thank you, Sunil. So someone I've known for like 20 years, through many different flavors of services, Mr. Kevin Campbell. Is this a blip we're going through, or is there a big change going on?
So as you know, Phil, I'm a believer that this is not a blip. It's a fundamental reshaping of the industry. And I think as an industry, we need to own the fact that it's a reshape and that it's a disruption that we need to deliver. And I think we need to understand that, the users are saying we're not delivering enough value and we got to deliver more value. And, I spend a lot of time talking to CEOs and C-level executives, and they're saying, what's different? You guys are still putting in systems and using models and talking about things the same way you did 20 years ago. Yeah, you got a new set of words. Yeah, you got some fancier slides, probably AI-generated slides now. But you're still doing that SOS, right? So that's our challenge, right? And as an industry, we have to own that, because then what do? We say, oh, AI's out there, right? And so, I grew up under a woman who was a great mentor and leader for me, and she always said about technology, she said, when it can pick up my laundry, give me a call, right? And that's one extreme. And the other extreme is there are changes that are there, but I always say, is this different than the metaverse? Is this different than RPA? I can tell you why I think it probably is, but we got to demonstrate that. But what are we doing as an industry? Listen to every earnings call. Every earnings call is saying, oh, AI, right? And then the analyst asks you, how much are you investing in AI? And how many new projects do you have in AI? And I talk to all of you, right? And all the top companies, and everybody says, we're stretching the truth as fast as we can because we know it's there. Instead of looking back to ourselves and saying, what do we have to dramatically do to disrupt and change what we're doing?
And that is the fundamental question. So how much of this is down to advancements in AI, how much to other issues? Maybe Krishna at UST, you want to have a crack at this?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Phil. I think, as Sunil was saying, during COVID, technology became the forefront for everyone, and everyone started spending a ton of money on technology. And I think as we started seeing inflation and as money started drying up, the CFO started questioning, the board started questioning, hey, you spend all this money on technology, what am I getting? Where is the ROI? And you talked about what's happening with all the money that we spend, what is the business value we're getting? At the same time, generative AI comes in, it's a perfect storm, inflation combined with generative AI, and lots of talk about productivity and everything, which brings us to the question saying, can we do more with less? All the money we spend, do we really see business value? Now the boards are asking, can we apply AI to some of these? So I think that's where the pause, and that's what is causing the inflection point in the industry. Everyone is pausing for a moment to see, how do we do more with less? How do we get more ROI? How do we get more business value? I think that's what is causing this inflection point, Phil.
Yeah, and Riju and Genpact, there was a lot of talk today around, there's a lot of excitement from C-suite. But translating that down to the frozen middle and getting them to actually do something is a different challenge. So how much of this is a burning platform that's driving so much of this anxiety and excitement?
So going back to the point that was made earlier about there is a massive unmet need of value creation. The value has been generated in the industry for the longest time through cost deflation, which runs out after a period of time. But all of the promises around business value are a significant unmet need of the industry. So that is the burning platform. Now you suddenly have AI where it's the answer to finding all of the value that you couldn't. However, if we go back and look at what were the underlying issues that prevented value from happening in the first place, sorting out your data, making sure that the processes could talk to the data, and making sure that there was some sort of underlying platform that data could ride on so that you could make decisions, insights, and actions. The good news is that with AI, some of those issues will get addressed. Of course, it's a lot of POCs right now, which then pause because there's nothing scalable. But like every technology, this is going to go through a massive adoption curve, and most of us will see it in front of our own eyes.
Okay, so you think overhype in the short term and underhype in the long term?
Yes, overhype and promise in the short term, and yes, it will finally deliver. I have one sort of funny anecdote, and I was telling my husband, when AirPods first came, you remember, you had these white things sticking out of your ears, and most of us thought, oh, you think people are going to walk around streets with these things sticking out of their ears? And 3 months later, everyone had one. And because just the value and convenience of it was so high that you didn't mind the aesthetic looking so terrible.
Fantastic. So I'm going to go for you, Gajen, Kandiah, Hitachi, digital. Can we change habits of a lifetime and avoid becoming the next Kodak or Nokia, which simply failed to innovate with the times and were too late to play catch up once they'd woken up to reality? I don't think anyone from these companies are here.
So I'm wondering why this question's coming to me with those companies on the list. But joking aside, just just a little bit of context as well. Two types of it. Just to pick up on the last topic, if I was completely transparent about my previous life before Hitachi, at one point we went to look at where are we actually delivering outcomes for customers, right? Across almost 300,000 people. And what we realized was almost 70% of it was T&M work, which we would normally call staff augmentation, right? We tell a story around it, we wrap it up really nicely, and we present it in a way that comes across as if we are domain experts and we have depth of knowledge around what kind of business our customers are running, and therefore we are, we say we have these industries and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's a bunch of people doing work on a T&M basis, right? Or sometimes fixed bid. So the reason I set that context is, I work today, I'm at Hitachi, and at Hitachi, we sort of have this, very distinct situation where, on the one hand, we're an industrial company. We have, rail. We build trains, we operate trains, we do signaling, we do rail control. So we do a bunch of rail-specific energy transition, transmission, distribution, heavy machinery, and we have a digital capability, a technology capability, which is over 60,000 people doing technology work. It's an $80 billion company, 300,000 people. So I get to sit, interestingly, on both sides of this equation. And my assessment of this is that we are no longer, and maybe AI is triggering this, or Gen AI has forced this on us, is we are in a situation where we can no longer be told. I can't, as a buyer, tell the vendor or the partner what to do, right? Because I don't know what it is. Right? We kind of went through this journey during the mobility days, and then again during the digital transformation days. But in this particular case, nobody here can tell me there is a new architecture and what that architecture looks like, right? That is not defined, it's yet to come. Nobody knows the true impact of what AI is, even though there's probably more AI experts than technologists in the world today, right? It's crazy how AI expertise has become tremendous, and the volume of AI experts is crazy. But what we are learning is the only way to figure this out is sit side by side with our partners, in this case a rail engine manufacturer or rail control person or team, and then collectively understand the journey. It's not even the end state, right? Sort of how do we apply, if it be AI or digital. For us, even digital is new in the context of industrial. And then apply and sort of slowly but surely move it in the right direction, because we're in mission and safety critical industries, we don't get to fool around too much, so we don't get to experiment too much, but we are starting to move the needle with some of the new technologies that we brought on board and some of the new companies we have in our portfolio. But I'm seeing this need to work together and collaborate, and also the need, and I'll shut up after this, I don't think this is any more one company can solve a problem type scenario. I think this is more about the ecosystem. It's about collaborating to solve, because I don't think any one person has the answer or any one company has the answer either.
Okay. This is challenging. Kevin, you've been watching this industry for a while. Do you think a lot of these guys are going to come through, or is it too late?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm while I've been in the industry a long time and I have my own passion for where I work today, I'm hopeful for the industry. But I got to tell you, I spend more time being disappointed in us, in each other right now, for the lack of bold moves. And I think we're going to talk later about measuring to Wall Street and all those other things that are there. I think we have to, right? But we got to ask ourselves really hard questions, right? And we've got, like everybody says, the phrase near to my heart, I use the hashtag business benefits on every post I use, because I'm trying to remind people all the time, this is about the business benefits, right? One of the CIOs on my board, he says to me, CIOs don't get fired because the project didn't get done. They get fired because the business benefits didn't get delivered that the rest of the business counted on. We forget that so much of the time, right, to be able to do that. So delivering those business benefits is there. And looking at it, look at the most fundamental thing. You've heard it a couple times today already when AI. Everybody will tell you data is so important, right? Phil put it up there as the biggest data debt, right, to be able to do that. How many companies, how many CIOs do I talk to, CEOs, that say, what they say to me is, I've been trying to clean up my data for 2 years. And I said, well, how are you doing it? And he said, well, I talked to company X, company Y, company Z, and they all told me to do it the same way. And I say, right, obviously, because I have a strong point of view, well, they're doing it wrong. Do it differently. And so I think the whole question of whether we're going to go down that hill and it's going to happen is, are we willing as an industry to do it differently, or other disruptors are going to come up and other companies and combinations are already coming up and are going to come up. And I'm not just talking to the startups on the West Coast or the East Coast or, you know, in Berlin, right? This is fundamental disruption of what's going on.
Yeah, and Riju, you're in the BPM space primarily, and that's clearly ripe for some disruption. Do you see this coming, and do you think it's going to be a very hard journey for traditional players to pivot at this point?
You know, if you go back, and you have great examples over here, about 33% of the incumbents of an industry outlive a disruption, statistically. And go back 100 years and look at the disruption of every industry, starting from horse carriages turning and to trains. So it's not new, it happens, the waves have become shorter. There are 3 or 4 lessons if you go back and look at what's happened. Number one, to the point that you're making, success is your biggest enemy. So your past success is your biggest enemy. Most leadership teams forget that formula ain't working in future and, you know, don't shift. Second, there isn't enough investment made in the new thinking and the new model. And we're just talking, you know, like number of times you say AI, what are you investing, and stretching it. But versus stepping back and putting real investments to get real outcomes. So that's the second problem that all of these and everyone else who didn't succeed have. The third one is, there is just too much discussion inside organizations without a point of view at a point in time, cut the debate and move on and get into action. And every company that has not succeeded has had like series of debates that didn't result in action. And finally, it's easy to say invest, but in the past models, we don't create enough room to pay for the future. So you're not squeezing your past model to pay for the future. So where's the investment going to come from? We can blame Wall Street, but yeah, as a business, you're accountable to deliver. So it's a tough rope. I mean, it's a tough journey, but there are enough lessons in our history that tell us what we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Phil, can I build on a couple of these points?
Sure.
So, you know, one of the things that we've seen, and I do think there is this fundamental shift that has happened, is that as we move from services, human provide services, to more digital assets, companies like mine believe those are assets we should own, right? And so now we're faced not necessarily with just a choice of, well, who do we buy a service from? It's more, I want to own that asset, and do I develop it myself, or do I develop it in partnership with some of the folks in this room? And more often than not, especially in a risk-averse area, we'll build it ourselves. The second area that we see is, and it's especially visible, I think, in the space that we're in right now with the hype around first automation and then Gen AI, is there are very few really bold examples where there are best practices that are coming from the providers. You almost get the feeling, and again, this is the companies buying the services point of view, that we are at best co-innovating. If not, we would say, we're teaching you, and then we're asking you to help scale it. And that's just not a great equation. It's an equation that challenges the businesses to say, well, we'll figure out how to scale. and then we don't need to have that dependency on the service providers. So it comes down to your value equation, Kevin. I think it's a much harder value equation now, and the scars of RPA and the hype that went around that, and now the anticipation of what AI will bring are all very visible.
And just to pick up on that, if I put on my Hitachi hat, not the service provider hat, we're doing exactly that, right? We're bringing everything in-house, right? We spend a significant amount of money out externally with third parties. And, we're lucky enough that we have internal SI and engineering capabilities. But, from a CEO down, the mandate is in-source, right? We want our knowledge back. We want control of our expertise. And we want to build our own IP, because owning our own IP ultimately will make a difference in terms of how we're able to compete in the market. Now, that could be purely an industrial company view, but there is a fundamental belief within our company that owning our IP and building it and maintaining it within our organization will give us competitive advantage that doesn't exist in the market today.
Yeah. Well, let's get bits of leadership. And I mean, who needs to own and drive this change mandate, and is it really possible? In the casino, that is quarterly, Wall Street quarterly numbers. Do today's leaders have the attitude and desire to change, or do they need to set aside for a new breed? Because you said you can't live on past glories. Your CEO doesn't go to your CFO and say, that was a great 10 million you saved me 3 years ago. He's going to go, I want more. So do we need to step aside and see a new breed of leaders step in, or can us, the existing people, change amongst themselves? I mean, maybe Sunil, you want to think about that?
Yeah, so on the first one, actually, I'm owned by a private equity firm. So I'll give you an example from this year.
Oh, wow. Could be worse, right?
So we were debating our board budgets for this year and going back and forth. And I don't know why I said it and how I said it. I said, guys, don't think like a private equity investor this year. So they were taken aback and said, okay, what should we think like? I said, you should be thinking like a strategic investor this year. So you should be investing in AI, investing in growth. And if you don't do this, don't come and talk to me 3 years later from the value creation part of it, the multiples part of it. You might get the EBITDA, but you may not get the valuation. So play a strategic investor, believe in what I'm saying, etc. So we went back and forth. And then I said, okay, guys, tell me what's the minimum you need this year. So we agreed on a number which was lower. And say anything I generate will be plowed back into the business. So I could take advantage of the fact that I'm private, and now I have the control of my budgets for the entire year on where and how to deploy the money. So it's a risk that I've taken, or we have taken as a management team, but I think that's the reason at least being private helps me that way. Now, on the second one, it's a tough one, Phil. I think it's the leaders, it's a tough one, to be honest with you, in terms of like how they think, or the leaders think. When we deal with customers, they think they're the custodians. Like I met a healthcare customer, CIO 3 weeks back, and he said, we don't want to touch AI. And then you work with I work with a lot of technology customers that they're all about AI, that okay, push, 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 and push. So I think it's a mixed bag.
I think I'm owned by private equity today, which anybody wants to have a conversation afterwards. That's not a picnic to be able to do that, but you see a lot of people back. If you have a good private equity firm, they demand returns too, and they have the same pressures. Now, you can say it's not quarterly, it's yearly or whatever, but it's still there. But I have a lot of friends, who are CEOs, and Phil and I have talked about this a couple times, and what their investors tell them is buy back stock, right? And I maintain that buying back stock is the simple, dumbest thing you can do. Because all it means is that you don't have any better ideas, right? You're driving the stock value up by taking the cash and putting it back to the company. But every incentive, I've seen letters from large shareholders, right, to CEOs saying, buy back stock, because it's the lowest risk for them to be able to do that. So the answer to your question, Phil, is you got to have people that are self-confident, right, that have a point of view and are just going to say, you know what, I can do that, and then I'm going to be Blockbuster. Another one from your list, right? So I'll do what you say until there's one share of stock that's that's really valuable, but that's it. If not, I'm going to reinvent my business. If you're not reinventing yourself every 3 to 5 years, you're in trouble. And now is the time for reinvention. And the service providers, right? What Jeff or Ganesh says, you know, we have to reinvent ourselves, and we have to resist and live. It's a hard job, right? It's really hard to feel that tension and fight the street, but you have to, because otherwise, one is sheer death. The other way, at least I got a 50-50 shot, right? If I make a bold move, they might fire me because it was wrong, but at least got a 50-50 shot that it was the right move.
Phil, another point. I mean, in fact, in terms of who needs to own, the CEO needs to own, especially for service companies. But how it needs to be executed is, I mean, somebody said strategic investor. You got to turn your company into a bunch of startups. You know, people who are closer to the customer, who are forming teams and solving problems. I think that's what you have to do, and really empower them at the front end of the customer to come up with those innovation and solve it for the customer. Unless you turn your company into a group of startups rather than being this monolith, pyramid-oriented company, I think we are not going to change.
It's interesting. The biggest criticism I've heard of on the service provider side is when the C-suite team is disengaged from the customers, and there's a gap between them and the actual. And sometimes it's not their fault, but if they're not talking to the customers, you're never going to innovate.
Correct.
That's a really, really critical point.
Let me build on this point here on the service providers, because I do think there's actually a double negative impact. I think there is this de-emphasis of the benefits of scale, right? Which I don't think they're quite as what they used to be when we were largely selling labor, right, and skilled labor. I think the second one is, and this will at some point pivot even in a company like Merck, is today larger scaled service providers have a benefit because they are entrenched in the purchasing systems of companies like ours. And smaller companies, like we saw on the panel earlier today, have a hard time breaking into that mechanism. That'll change. Eventually, those companies will find their place, right? And the barriers, that barrier to entry will get weaker and weaker. And those smaller, more nimble companies will take advantage of the lack of specialization and personalization that the larger service providers have at least a reputation for.
Let me just add this only because it's different. Just talking about Hitachi one more time is to the second question. When GenAI launched, or GPT 3.5 launched, within a month, our CEO was on top of it, right? He comes from R&D, so that may have had something to do with it, right? But he immediately knew that it was going to be a huge, huge transformative technology. He set aside $200 million, and he then set a organizational agenda to say, go execute on the 4 Cs, right? Basically, sort of all the content, code generation, co-pilots, and call centers, right? Go execute on that and come back and tell me what's the value that you can create by doing this. How much productivity can you drive with it? And that really set the entire company on a journey because you're the CEO leaning in. So, in terms of can leaders make a difference, I think leaning in right off the bat, again, completely surprised. He canceled all his meetings for 2 months, and all he talked about was AI with a bunch of experts, right? Now, when you're a Japanese company, I guess you could do that because we also operate on these 3-year plans. They're called midterm management plans, right? So now you get a lot of pressure to achieve your plan on an annualized basis. However, the key is hitting your 3rd year, right? Yeah. So that focus actually has given us a lot more flexibility in order to be able to execute on this transformation agenda that we have. I would love for more companies to have that flexibility, right? Even the public companies, because we're public in Japan.
Right.
But it's an expectation that everybody, everything, like our next one comes up in April of 25, but there is an expectation that you lay a plan out, includes M&A, by the way, which is a complete surprise to me. And then they track you and they give you the runway to go execute behind it, which I think is a fantastic. There are things that I don't like about the whole model, but this is one thing that I do really, really appreciate about where we are.
Thank you. So here's my favorite question today. I'm Jeff. I'm going to have you take first stab at this. But even if some providers are making the right investments, doing the right things, training their people, aren't they held hostage by clients who just can't reinvent their business? I mean, this is a two to tango situation, right?
So yes, they are. Listen, I come from a highly regulated industry here. So there are some structural elements that would make us move slower. There is a risk aversion around anything that could, if gone awry, could cause reputational damage, right? So you have that resistance as well. At the same time, I have a CEO who used to be the CFO, and so there's a pretty big mandate that says, listen, we're going to get the advantages out of this stuff. And so there's an awful lot of what we do, which is not clinical development, which is not, certified or, compliant manufacturing. There's a lot of administrative processes in our company, a lot of paper, a lot of authoring, a lot of summarizing, a lot of coding that he fully expects will be disrupted in a significant way. And so there are these two speeds, right? There is almost the mission critical element, which we will move very cautiously on and will be biased towards managing the risk with our own internal assets and resources. And then there will be this non-mission critical part, which it's going to be get it done yesterday, because you're taking money away from mission critical. For every dollar you spend, that you're not getting your 40% or your 50%. And so my team, which does a lot of the shared service activities for functional groups, I mean, the conversations we're having, if we don't start putting those ideas on the table now, we'll just get the target. And then we'll be struggling for an answer.
So we talked a lot about these. Sorry.
I have a funny anecdote to share. One of the CIOs that we were talking to, in fact, he was saying, to your point, he said, earlier when I used to go to my CFO with saying, I need to move this to cloud, I need to invest in data. So he used to say, how long, budget, ROI, all of that. Now the same CFO is coming back and saying, okay, what are you doing in GenAI? Because my 7-year-old son just figured out, how to do things or how to write a contract without using any of this. So what are you guys doing? So the boards and the CFOs and the CEOs are asking CIOs that question. So he said, Krishna, don't come and ask me what are my priorities. We need to sit down and say, my environment, how can we make a change? And what is that I can go to my board with? What is that I can go to my CFO with? I think that is definitely changing, Phil. So there is pressure on everyone to make this change.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about fixing debts, right? And data, process, skills, and then tech are the big four. But I think, as you mentioned, regulatory and compliance is huge, but also data. Fixing your data debt is number one. If you even want to move down the Gen AI path, how do you get better access to data and data quality? So moving on to partnerships, and maybe Riju, you could kick us off here. Can we structure partnerships differently? So we can cater for more innovation and outcomes and more joint risk reward. I mean, I know when Tiger, before he retired recently, talked a lot about this, right, in terms of trying to get a certain proportion of your contracts as outcome-based and not. I mean, I know it's intentioned very well, but how hard is that convincing your clients to move down that direction?
Yeah. I think there was, show of hands, how many have FTE contracts, and then, how many deliver outcomes. The issue is the nomenclature of creating some sort of certainty of cost. And FT gives you certainty of cost. The buyer actually sits there. It's incumbent on the service providers to actually shift that to a value equation. For us, we've seen that over 20% of our contracts now are significantly on the value equation, no longer on the input side of the equation. But it's been a harder journey in spite of the fact that we've sort of led this with, I'm happy to sign up for outcomes. It's difficult for the buyer to say, okay, how much am I going to sign up for? And there have been multiple occasions where you kind of deliver value and then the buyer sort of turns around and says, oh, so you did this. I could have done this myself. Now I'm not going to give you this value anymore, because it's not sitting in IP and it is not sitting in expertise. It is sitting in something that is not durable. So therefore it doesn't last. So one, understanding what is the outcome that is most important to the buyer for the short run and the long run, and creating some sort of joint value equation around that, and shifting the commercial models so that it is easier for the buyer and there's more predictability of what they will end up paying. Actually, it's a predictability problem.
Yeah. Predictability. Sunil?
I'll add that. So we've been on this journey for the last 3 years on signing up outcome-based models. And the whole GenAI conversation is helping us right now already. I think the challenge is that what do you define as an outcome? Because it can be at various points of time. It can be a cost per case. It could be a fixed price. So we have also gone to the extent of signing up deals which are linked to number of active lines the customer has in the market. We are actually working on a deal where, or it's almost getting signed, where we are charging the customer number of active automobiles in the market with their brand. So now that's because they are actually proportioning the cost as per that in their P&L. So it's an easier way of handling or explaining that to them. So there are two problems today in terms of convincing the customers. One is the trust issue. That are you trusting the outcome? Are you trusting the model that you're giving to the customer? And the second is the definition of what you define. And for the first one, the solution is that you have to be, like what we have seen is that once we have 6 months of data on both sides, the customer is very, very comfortable to move to an outcome-based model. And it's a crawl, walk, and run journey, and it works very well. We have signed up a deal where we took the client inputs, lost a lot of money. 6 months later, we went back and said, okay, what our assumptions were wrong. It doesn't work for us. We got an 80% rate increase, and the client is still continuing with us because they gave us the wrong inputs. Because we proved to them there is no way we can deliver as per your assumptions. And you prove us wrong, or we prove you wrong. So one of us is wrong. So it worked out well, and the client is happy with the 80% rate increase. We explained them why it was happening. So it was the other piece is working with the clients to define. Most of the clients are willing to do that. I think it's a journey with them. But if you go a new vendor and new partner to the customer and say, okay, I'm willing to sign up an outcome, that is actually a tough one to execute.
Especially with the new client.
Yeah.
I think, can I just add, I think again, we've got to look at both supplier and customer on these things to change it up, right? Because many of you have heard me joke before. I said, COVID wasn't really created wherever you think the source was. It was created by the procurement departments of the world. And it's so that nobody could talk to each other, right? To be able to do that, to try to drive that. Because if you think about it, it seems crazy, but then in the other world, you say, you know what? What do I do when I talk about value today? What's the standard? And I know it's traditional and not everybody's that way and stuff, but generally, most procurement departments, they put two suppliers in the room, right? They argue them until they got the same scope, and then they say, how low can you go? Where in there is what value you're going to deliver, what's different from you from somebody else, and where are you? The problem is at the hard part, the pressure as a supplier who has to deliver revenue and all the other stuff is eventually you just take that deal because you got to get there. Rather than saying, and this is where it's a complete disruption across both buyers and sellers, we got to say what we're doing isn't working, And how are you going to start that revolution, right? How are you going to change that to be something that's different than where it was before? Because that is what's going to drive the change. And we have to be bold enough to say, hey, if that's what you want, whoever you are, to be able, we aren't doing it, right? That's the lowest price we can do. And you know what? We spend a lot of our time cleaning up after people who originally said to us, you know, we want a lower price. I was with the CIO, CEO a couple weeks ago. He had been on the same project for 2 years. Couldn't get it live, right? Bad data, right? We came in, we said, this is what it's going to cost. He's like, wow, that's expensive. I said it should be reassuringly expensive, right? 14 weeks later, they were live. 2 years versus 14 weeks. But that's all about changing the thinking about what people are trying to do.
That's fantastic. I like reassuringly expensive. That's a good brand. Okay, we have 4 minutes between us and non-alcoholic drinks. So finally, one wish for this AI era. We're going to move along the line. Maybe, Jeff, you can start. We have one wish for this era. What would it be?
You know, honestly, an acceleration of value. I think we are, I know my organization and I think some of the partner organizations we deal with are still under a burden of overhype and under-deliver. And if we can actually show, doesn't have to be across the board, but examples of real transformational opportunity, I think this can kind of put your faith back in, yeah, there could be something here.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. It's a transformational opportunity. Sunil, one wish?
So moving from death by 1,000 POCs to something actual in production.
There you go.
That's really good. I like that.
Listening well today. Gajen, one wish.
I would just wish AGI would come here and we can move on, right? It's just we keep talking about and put timelines and like 2 years, 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, right? Everywhere you go, there's a new timeline. But no, really, I think Roger said this earlier on one of the panels, right? I think AI is important. It will have a huge impact, and I fundamentally believe that. But at the same time, I think there is things you just need to get done today that don't require AI, and balancing those two things are really, really important. And I wish I could go to a meeting where it's not all AI, right? It's so overwhelming, and there are no new ideas. It's just a bunch of theories being thrown out. I just wish that we could balance it out and we could identify the place in which we can deploy it and then show progress to the point that you're making. Stop the pilots. Stop the pilots. Maybe that's a better one.
Just take that neocortical cortex and connect it right to the cloud, as Ray said.
Yeah.
I think a lot has been said. Mine would be moving from big bang innovation to innovation around the niches. I think there is a lot of work that can be done using AI in the niches.
Fantastic. Riju, one wish.
Business value ahead of cost.
Okay, that's a good one.
And I agree, some great one wishes there that were there. But the thing I would say is the first thing we do as an industry on the bias, let's stop lying to each other. Let's stop saying my number's bigger than your number. If you had 27 projects and I had 400 clients, let's stop saying when I'm on my earnings call, I had 500 clients. Because honestly, we all know that we're stretching what can be done right now and trying to catch the hype, but that's going to catch us in the ass. Bite us in the ass.
Yeah.
Catch and bite.
Catch and bite.
That's good.
Well, let's get this moving. How do we wrap this up, Elaine? Just send everyone straight to the bar, or? A few wee. Yeah, I'll just, what a fantastic day. So we had a lot of fun putting this together, and it's so awesome that so many of you turned up and hopefully enjoyed the proceedings. It was, right from the start to the end, Ray and Amy, and then all the great panels we had. I personally have loved it. Has anyone else has a comment or a cheer? Just a round of applause. Thank you very much, everybody.